Hello and welcome to today's our lecture. And today we are going to discuss poem by Kamala Das. And the title of the poem is The Sunshine Cat.
अच्छा नवीन पोएम है का
Yes. In the last lecture, we completed the poem
हाँ
My
माय
Grandma.
ग्रैंडमदर्स हाउस
Right.
यस
Today we would see the poem The Sunshine Cat. So the poem is taken from the collection of poems titled Summer in Calcutta, published in 1965. The theme in the present poem is lust and love. So the present poem deals with the concept of love and the concept of lust. The poet in the present poem compares and contrasts between lust and love. As other poems of the poet, the present poem also is a personal poem, is a subjective poem. It shares the personal frustration of the poet, that is Kamala Das. And the poem is having both the ages. The first age is personal suffering, personal frustration, and the second age is its universal implications. So through the present poem, the poet shares her views regarding love and lust, and we can imagine the universal implications in the present poem also, because it is not the case of the poet only, but the poet is representing the female class who is facing the same problem like the poet regarding lust and love. So the poet has approached the tragic consequences of the life of lust, wherein there is no space for the emotional and spiritual satisfaction. So the present poem moves around two words, that is emotional and spiritual satisfaction. As we know that the poems of Kamala Das highly deal with two things, that is sex and love. So in the present poem, she expects love on the basis of spiritual foundation. What is that spiritual foundation? What is her concept? We would see later on. So the poet has adopted the female perspective, female attitude for highlighting the predicament of a helpless and frustrated woman in the modern male dominated society. Predicament means bad situation, frustration, right? And the poet shares her situation being predicament of a helpless. She calls herself helpless and a frustrated woman. As we know that in most of her poems, she deals with her frustrated married life, and she also confesses her extramarital affairs also. But she presents a justification for her extramarital affair. And the justification is that she has no spiritual satisfaction by her husband. And she complains in most of her poems and in the present poem also that her husband just wanted her body only. So he was interested in sex only, but he was never attached to her. He was attached to her body and sex only. So we cannot say, it would be wrong to say that the poet is rejecting or opposing sex or physical relationship. She is not saying that thing. She is of the opinion that sexual love or physical love and spiritual love, or let's say emotional attachment, these two things are equal important in a relationship, right? So in her poems, in the present poem also, she compares and she calls these two different things, that is emotional and spiritual attachment, and she calls as the two wheels of the vehicle of relationship. So she said that relationship is nothing but a vehicle, and this vehicle is having two wheels, and the first wheel is sexual relationship, that is physical relationship, and the second is spiritual attachment, or let's say emotional attachment. So the poet tells us that a woman expects sexual love as well as spiritual or emotional love from her life partner. And Kamala Das always complains that she just got sexual love from her husband. And she is so harsh that she compares indirectly that sex with her husband as a rape. Because in that sexual attachment, she finds no emotions, she finds no attachment. So she is hungry for spiritual satisfaction and emotional attachment that has been rejected by her husband. And the present poem also deals with the same theme. There is a clash between lust and love. So she defines love, she defines lust in the present poem, and she presents her justification, her clarification, her views in the modern male dominated society, where a woman is denied to express her emotions. That's why she decided to express herself in the form of words, in the forms of poetry. So the present poem's theme is the clash between, or let's say the comparison between the two things, that is lust and love. Let's move ahead. Let's go through the poem. She loved, here she means the poet herself. We can say that it is not just the story of the poet only. She is representing the female class who is facing the same problem. So it is not just the predicament of the poet herself. It can be the predicament of the female class which is facing the same problem like Kamala Das. So universal touch we can find over here. Let's begin with the poem. She loved, who loved her not enough, being selfish, and a crowd, the husband who neither loved nor used her, but was a ruthless watcher, and the band of cynics she turned to, clinging to their chests where new hair sprouted like great winged moths during her face into their smells and their young lusts oh, to forget, and they said, each of them, I do not love, I cannot love, it is not in my nature to love, but I can be kind to you. They let her slide from pegs of sanity into a bed made of soft with tears, and she lay there weeping, for sleep had lost its use. I shall build walls with tears, she said, walls to shut me in. Her husband shut her in every morning, locked her in a room of books with a streak of sunshine lying near the door like a yellow cat to keep her company. But soon winter came, and one day, while locking her in, he noticed that the cat of sunshine was only a line, a half thin line, and in the evening, when he returned to take her out, she was a cold and half dead woman, now of no use at all to men. So the present poem attacks on the mentality towards a woman, and we can find many harsh words used by the poet in the present poem. Let's go through the poem line by line. I hope there is no problem. Should I proceed?
हो सर, येतं ऐकायला. बोला सर.
Should I go to the next slide?
Yes sir.
No problem?
No.
Okay. Let's begin with the first few lines. As I told you, here she indicates the poet herself. She loved who loved her not enough, being selfish and a coward, the husband who neither loved nor used her, but was a ruthless watcher. See, if you go into the meaning of the word, we can find that in the opening passage of the poem, The Sunshine Cat, the poet highlights the disastrous, right, disappointing consequences, results of the life of lust, which often end in destruction and death. It shows that only real love can give a person emotional and spiritual satisfaction. So again, the poet starts this poem with the words, key words, that is emotional and spiritual satisfaction. So she compares both these things over here, and he attacks on the feeling of lust, and she complains in the present poem that she faced the feeling of lust from her husband and not the feeling of emotional attachment. Let's go further. The lines that we have just seen in the last slide indicate the realistic picture of the poet's married life, poet's domestic life, and she explains the pathos, the suffering, the grief of a woman who failed to get real love in life. So the present poem is a complaint poem, and she complains about her husband. And she complains that from her husband she expected a lot. She expected the very simple things like love, care, support, and attachment. These things seem simple, but they are very important in our life as far as body is concerned and as far as mind is concerned. But she complains that she never got the basic things of a relationship from her husband like love, care, attachment, and support. On the contrary, on the opposite side, she received just a demand for sex, sex, and sex only. So she complains that she is so frustrated because of the illogical and unjustifiable behavior of her husband. So, as a wife, she shares her deeper emotions. As we know that in a domestic life, in the life after marriage, not only the wife but even the husband expect the same things like love, care, support, and emotional attachment. Here, the poet Kamala Das complains that she tried her level best to offer spiritual love to her husband, to offer support to her husband, and expected the same from him, but she was denied. And she complains that her husband was only interested to have sex only. So the first line in our present slide, she expresses her grief, her frustration that she failed to get real love in life. Here, real love indicates emotional attachment, care, like that. So she was sexually ill-treated and exploited by those whom she loved and were known to her. See, in the latter lines, the poet again attacks on the other men that came to her life. As we know that Kamala Das had many extramarital affairs, right? As she was frustrated in the house, she had to serve the love out of the house. And she expected that the real love was denied to her by her husband, and she was hopeful that she would get this real love out of the house. That's why she used to have many extramarital relationships with other men. But again, she was frustrated. And why she was frustrated again? She complains that she received the same kind of treatment by the other men also. So indirectly, she complains that the whole male community in the world, they just need sex from a lady, sex from a woman. And she complains that she was initially sexually ill-treated by her own husband, and later on the same ill-treatment continued at the hands of the other men also. So the other men failed to give her the real love. Then where to go now? Where to go? Her husband gave her the same treatment, and the other men right, made her more and more frustrated. So how to solve the problem in life? That was a big question mark before the poet. And that's why she is frustrated. She finds entrapped in a cage. So she complains that other men indulge in lust but denied her the emotional and spiritual thrills of love. So she complains that other men, like her husband, they enjoy sex with her, right? But after physical touch, after sexual relationship, they did not try to develop an emotional and spiritual relationship with her. So they just came, touched her, had sex with her, and आपके रास्ते मैं मेरे रास्ते, like that. So after that sexual relationship, there would be no, what you say, sharing of emotions. That's it. So here, spiritual love or emotional attachment, the poet expect sharing of inner thoughts, sharing of inner thoughts, and she feels that none other than her grandmother, that we discussed in our last lecture, none other than her grandmother, nobody in the world is there with whom she could express her feelings. Right? That's why she recalls the memories of her grandmother in that point. So she complains that all the male community, they are indulged in lust. They wanted lust, they wanted only physical love. Right? So she still is having emotional and spiritual hunger, and nobody is ready to satisfy the thirst of spiritual and emotional love of the poet. And she particularly referred to one person among them whom she really loved but got nothing in return. Right? And again, she comes back to highlight her husband. She justifies that she had to develop extramarital affairs because of her sexually ill-treated treatment given by her husband. And she indirectly tells us that if she had received sex and real love from her husband, then there would have no need for extramarital affairs, right? Because her all her desires would have been satisfied by her husband, right? So there would have been no issue of extramarital relationship. And she again complains regarding her husband. She tells us that when she got married, in the beginning, she wanted to have this kind of sexual as well as emotional attachment with her husband. Right. So she invested, she offered sex and emotions to her husband and expected the same from him. But she is frustrated as she got nothing in return from her husband. So, unfortunately, the man, that is her lustful husband, overlooked her emotional needs. Overlooked means neglected her emotional needs and limited himself to the gratification of his lust only. That's it. So her husband was interested in sex only, right? Whenever he wanted to have sex, he just called his wife, that is the poet, got the sex from her, and after that sexual relationship, he has nothing to do with her wife, that is the poet, till next attempt of sex. So we can say that in a harsh word, she calls herself as a sex doll to her husband, right? So it is nothing but like a machine. Whenever the husband gets the thirst of sex, just he comes near to the poet. And when that thirst is satisfied, there is no relationship between the husband and the wife. So the poet complains that the lustful husband, see, she calls her husband lustful husband. And this lustful husband overlooked, ignored her emotional needs and just expected sex from her. Right? So, in the discussion of the present poem, there is a repetition of sex, lustful husband, physical love, all those things. So ironically, he was not only selfish but also a cowardly person. Coward, that is called Mitra, Ghabrat in Marathi, Darne wala in Hindi. So she attacks on her husband with the help of words, and she blames her husband as selfish and coward. Selfish in the sense he just wanted sex from his wife, and cowardly in the sense that he has no daring to deep into the heart of his wife, right? Like that. So he never bothered to have emotional rapport with her. Here, rapport means good relationship. Never bothered. He never tried even to have emotional attachment with her. He neither loved her nor used to her, but remained a ruthless watcher. Here, ruthless means having no kindness. So cruel. A ruthless watcher only to kept a close watch over her relations with other men. Like that. So she received nothing from her husband. Only frustration, and frustration only. That's why she calls him as selfish, cowardly, and ruthless. Right? And that's the frustration she expresses in each and every word of her poem. Right? So let's stop over here and we'll continue in our next lecture. थांबायचं आपण? Time is
हो
over.
सर चालेल. हो
कवितेबद्दल काय अडचण?
सर नाही कवितेबद्दल तर काही नाही, पण सर 10 डिसेंबर पासून पेपर आहेत ना?
Just a minute.